Hello, this is a Q&A episode. Just for a bit of background before I get into the questions, I have just recorded a episode 90 I believe, and I was really annoyed with the sun and it was bothering me, and you know what happened as soon as I finished recording? It's nice and clouded and rainy, and let me show you just how clouded and rainy it got. Look at that. Look at that miserable weather. So now I just changed all my setup. Oh dear. This will work. Professional. This is kind of like the after show thing, the behind the scenes, the I should have had lunch thing. So I'm going to do a Q&A. I asked on Instagram for any questions and I'm going to go through them now and just answer them, and it's like just having a bit of a prolonged episode because some time opened up for me and I can do that, and so I will stop talking, Ellie, and start talking. What made you start podcasting in the first place? Oh dear. Okay, let's take the entire background story. And so after having discovered them, there was a very short space of time until I decided I wanted to start podcasting again. So that is when we get to your question. Basically, I couldn't really find me. I found lots of interesting knitting. There was a lot of stockinette socks. It seemed like everyone were knitting socks, and there was the odd brioche, but mainly it was just sock knitting. Everyone was like watching everyone knit socks, and I'm like, I mean, it's ironic now, right? Because I'm totally on board, but at the time I'm like, you're just all watching each other knit stockinette socks. Where's the color work? Where are the jumpers? Where are the garments? It's like, that seems absurd that I am like saying that now, because like everyone's doing color work in garments now, but back then that was really not that common. So long story short, I just kind of wanted my knitting to be represented. I wasn't knitting with hand-dyed yarn at all. At the time I started my podcast, I have just knitted with one Madeline Tosh skein and one Woolmeister skein. It really wasn't my area. Both of these were solid colors. I'd really not tried variegated or speckled, hand painted, nothing. It was just completely foreign territory to me, and I kind of wanted to show how you can really make really cool stuff with hardly any money, because I had hardly any money. And I mean, I'm from the land of you can spend £1 on a skein, if not maybe 3, to just have decent quality, and use that to make amazing colourwork jumpers. And that at the time was not at all represented in the knitting podcast community that I was aware of. So I wanted to provide more variety, more diversity in knitting, in the kind of knitting that was talked about. The idea was also to represent more pattern diversity as well. I have so many books on Norwegian patterns you can only get in Norway, only Norwegian, lots of amazing garments, and I really was going to knit them all, you know, roughly, and I wanted to show you guys. But I have actually been really sucked into Ravelry myself, and now I'm mainly knitting English language patterns, and even when I have the option to knit a Norwegian language pattern, I don't. So just for reference, I started podcasting in the year of 2016, the autumn of 2016. So that's, yeah, just 2 years ago. And it is amazing how much the knitting podcast community has changed. How much of the stuff that I used to make back then, more people are making now, but also how much the others were making back then that I am now embracing. You know, I'm subscribed to Pom Pom. I knit stockinette socks and self-striping socks. I knit more from indie designers now than from book releases in Norway, which may or may not be made by indie designers. I wanted to change things, but I also wanted it to change me, and it did, and like both things have happened. I've gotten people into colorwork mittens, they've gotten me into self-striping socks. So it's been a really cool journey. I don't know if I answered your question. Let me go back to that. What made me start podcasting? It was that. Yeah. What do you do with your scrap yarn? Oh, I have some of it just balled up in my window shelf by my bed. I don't know why. I usually bind off when I'm sat in bed, and I just leave them in there, and I have this idea that I'm going to glue some of it into my pattern binder, but a pattern project binder, but I don't really keep that one up to date. I'm more of a Ravelry kind of gal. I do have this other thing though. I put all my little ends into this little thing. This is a bizarre thing. It's like a spice jar, so it stands like this, but when you want your spices, right? I got it from Tiger. And I just put all my ends in the past 2 years. I thought it was going to look a lot cooler than this. This looks super dumb. I don't know. And I tend to knit with so many of the same colours that I've actually started to bin some of the ends anyway and be like, okay, if it's different enough, it gets to go in there. Apart from that, I will really just wind them into minis and get back to them when I find there's a place for them. Like, I have a bunch of single ply merino minis in a cupboard. I've got lots of sock minis in other place. I've got lots of fionul minis that is just, you can just pop them into any colour work really. So like, they're all worthwhile, even though the leftovers, I can always keep them for something like a colour work detail on a mitten in the future, the heel of a sock, a stripe in a shawl, you know, there's always something, so I keep them. Yeah. What am I wearing? Well, you will of course not have seen the episode that I just recorded prior to this where I talked about it, but in case you haven't seen that anyway, now that this goes up, I'm wearing the hay sweater. This is the hay sweater designed by Claire of Sister Mountain, and it is beautiful, knit in Walcott Opus. It is the softest thing, and I just want to live in this, which I guess I am. It's soft, it's beautiful, I love it. It's amazing how quickly it dried as well. Should have mentioned that on the podcast. I soaked it last night, just before midnight, and it was dry by the morning. Like, the rib was a little bit damp, so I just had it lay in front of my fan heater that was on anyway. Super good, cozy. And I accidentally cropped mine, thinking it will grow because it's got alpaca. It might not, but it really fits my waist high skirt really well, so I don't really care. And the sleeves are nice and long, and I love this jumper. Yeah. How did you get into designing brackets? I love your stuff. Oh, thank you. That's another story that, again, long-term viewers will know, but I will share it anyway because I do not expect people to have watched everything. That would... At the same time as I was starting this podcast, I was just knitting colour work all the time. Of course, I showed up in various knit nights in London, and one of which was at Knit with Attitude in London, which is run by a lady from my hometown. And she was recognising that I was knitting all this Norwegian colour work and asked me if I wanted to teach it. And I thought, oh, well, okay, I need to narrow it down. I need to find one thing that we can knit together that I am legally allowed to distribute in the class. Turns out that's quite difficult. So I had to come up with a pattern. Now, I'm already notorious at modifying patterns, so actually coming up with a pattern is not as hard as I thought it would be. So I came up with the Sound Mittens pattern. I'd already come up with 2 free patterns before that. That was just like accidentally a thing I made due to need, really. So I put that up for sale because I talked about it on the podcast, people wanted it, and it did really well. We had a knit along for it. It really became relatively successful, given that I was just starting out. It wasn't like a huge success, it was just kind of like, wow, people are knitting this thing, huh? And I did a sock design, and then people were still knitting more the mittens rather than the socks, and I thought, oh, they need more variety. We need more mittens that are this quick to make and easy to follow. So I'm just gonna, you know, chart away, and I thought it could be a nice collection, and in the end it became more of a subscription club. You may see where I'm going with this. And I suddenly was just making patterns like that. I was making mittens in different weights, and fingerless mitts, and I put them up for sale on Ravelry. I put the odd free pattern up, like the Christmas hat. I tried to even submit to magazines, so that didn't really work out, but then I would suddenly have more patterns that I could put on Ravelry, so that just became a thing, and I suddenly kept having all these ideas. And now that I knew how to design mittens, I could do that, and then I knew how to design socks, I could do that, and I've kind of advanced all these things since back then. I do different things in my patterns now, but I don't know if this is answering the question how, or just saying what happened, because it's really just what happened, you know, one thing leads to the next. It's not like I ever made a plan that I was going to design. I was just like, look, it's working, look at that, it's working, oh, I'm gonna try that. With that caught on, and just follow that. I guess I've been lucky in that sense, and God knows I've not done things properly. Like in the beginning, I did not do things properly. I've been very thorough since, but like the very first pattern I did, the way I developed it was interesting. I wrote down the pattern and I tested it out in a coffee shop with like lots of people from a knitting group I knew that would come and sit and knit them with me for 3 hours, and I was their teacher, and we'd try it out. There were maybe 6 of them, and I could just see how well I could teach, and I could test the pattern, right? I had test knitters right there. It was pretty cool. And then I tried it out in the actual class I was teaching, and it had a lot of errors. It was not that well written after all, it turned out. I found the errors. I got in touch with the participant later and made sure she got an accurate, up-to-date, good version of the pattern, which I just developed right before I decided to put it up on Ravelry. I was just looking at it, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put it up for sale now as I promised, but everything needs to change. So I just rewrote the entire thing. I mean, the chart was the same, but the text, I just redid it and make it crystal clear, spoon feeding row by row. And I didn't test that. I didn't do anything really that properly. I was like, but it's the same pattern, I'm just writing it clearer, it's the same thing. So I just put it up on Ravelry without a second pair of eyes to look at it. That, in hindsight, was a really bad idea, but you know what, it worked out really well. I magically managed to make a pattern that didn't have any errors. Point is, I didn't really do things properly, but people liked how it looked, and I think that's the core of it. You can follow rules like that, you know, trying to stick to all the rules and do it properly or whatever, but it's not about following rules. It's really about appealing to something in people that I have yet to figure out what is. I've just happened to tap into that. It's weirdly working out, and I'm just going with it. If you had a choice in a job, what would it be? Ooh. Can it be not a job? See, I'm one of those odd people that would actually get a lot out of life if I just did not have to work and just did fun things. I know for most people they would like enjoy it for a week and then they were like, I have no purpose in life. Oh, I'm like, I don't know if I'm one of those. But I think I would still work. I would just not call it work, you know? Does that make sense? Like I would design. That's work, but I'm like, oh, that's so much fun, I would like to do that. And I would go have talks, which is kind of like teaching, but I wouldn't be calling it that, so it wouldn't be like work. Like I would never sit around and do nothing. I would just, I'm not answering the question again. What job would it be? I kind of like the soul design thing, to be honest. Maybe I have my dream job, I don't know. There's definitely a lot to be said for being self-employed. That really appeals to me. Like, I'm not a fan of the admin side, but I'm also a fan of being self-reliant and really getting a bit political now, but basically getting what my work is worth. You know, not selling my labor, but rather getting the fruits of my labor. That appeals to me for a number of reasons I'm not going to get into. So whatever the work task would be, self-employment is actually something that appeals more and more to me, despite the admin. And yeah, have you tried something new in knitting that just really surprised you? I really like the recent talks that have been around helical knitting. When it comes to like a lot of stripes, I don't think it's for me, with the whole spiraling thing, though not good till I've tried it. But the idea that we can avoid that job when we are alternating color hand-dyed yarns, that I really like. I don't know if it's like surprised me. I'm just like, oh yeah, that works, that's neat, I'm gonna do that from now on, and I can't believe I haven't done it earlier, you know? So that's definitely one thing. I managed to learn one pass brioche this summer because me and Nathan of Submortician went to the same retreat, and that meant I could just like exploit him for all his one pass brioche wisdom, and that has really brought me to understand brioche in general. I understand one pass and two pass to some extent brioche as well, and I would like to be able to translate more of two pass regular brioche to one pass. So one pass being that you work just one row for one row instead of working it twice. It's really nice, I like it. So that might be one thing. It was really fun generally to take part in Nathan's classes because he really thinks about the anatomy of the stitch, that how it's positioned, you know, how it's mounted on the needle, and confusion around language where we talk about twisted stitches and stitch mount, which is not the same thing. Actually, I'm going to take a bit of time to talk about that now. It's not quite on the question that you asked, but sort of. We talk about the front leg and the back leg of stitches a lot. These are completely arbitrary terms, right? Because a stitch can have its front leg at the back, but then it's the back leg, and if you knit through the back leg, you actually knit through the front leg because you've just mounted it differently, not twisted it, you just mounted it differently. And I think this language about the stitch, we really need to get into everyday knitting language, because I've tried to explain this to many people now and it really is quite hard to get across. I'm gonna see if I can explain this to you now. Let's see. Okay, so with dark yarn, that's a terrible idea, Lee. Don't do that. Hello. So this, what we have here, front leg, right? Front leg. What if I do this? Now it's the back leg, but it's the same leg. What? Why? So if I knit through the back leg, it will be as though I knitted through the front leg. These things, saying front leg and back leg, don't mean anything, okay? But what if we called it the leading leg? See if I kind of like getting this in focus, thank you. What if we call this the leading leg? Putting it this way, it is still the leading leg, it still leads. Yeah? What is this? It's the trailing leg. It's now in the front, it would usually be in the back. Yeah? If we use that terminology, we're suddenly not so confused when we talk about, say, Eastern knitting and that kind of thing. And so when I say knit through the leading leg, it's usually through the front, but if it's this way, it's this way. And we talk about twisting a stitch. If I do this, we say, oh, it's twisted. No, it's not. It's just been remounted. It's not twisted. Look at it. If we had some, this is why I don't do tutorials, guys. It never stays in focus. No, you know, if that was a question that came up. So it's not twisted. I have remounted it, yes, but it's not twisted. The only way it will be twisted is if I knit through the trailing leg, sorry, like this. Now it's twisted because I knitted through the trailing leg. It's not about being remounted. It's about knitting through the trailing leg. If I knit through the front leg, even if it's that way, even if it's that way. Oh my god, mind blown. So that was something I learned this year, that I just, everyone needs to know this stuff and to know the difference between leading leg and trailing leg, front leg and back leg, and just stitch the front leg and back legs, to be honest, because they just don't mean anything. They're completely reliant on stitch mount, and we need to stop talking about stitch mount as though it means twisted stitch, because it's not until you have knitted through the trailing leg that it's twisted. I'm gonna go off my soapbox now and answer the next question. I got more questions now. What is your absolute favorite hat pattern, brackets, have knitted or in the knitting list? It's a shame that I packed up all my knitting because I could have actually shown you, but I really like every hat that I basically knitted the past year or so, because they have fitted me a lot better than earlier ones. I'm gonna put them here. This is a hat by Diana Walla. I completely blanked on the name of the hat, but I absolutely love it. It fits me really well. I love that she graded her hats, because so many designers don't, and I assume that we all have the same head size. We do not. This head is huge. It's empty, but it's huge. So I really love that. I could just choose the largest size and it fit me. And I also love this hat, which came from a Norwegian knitting book, and it's knitted in Bologna, which is a chunky pelt wool, and it's amazing and I love it. It sits a lot looser, but I kind of like it. Oh, and the Diana Walla hat was made in Peer Gynt by Sandnes, which I really love. Another hat I really like that I actually have here is Isolde Teague hat. She's got really nice hats. I wish I hadn't blocked out the rib. That was dumb, because now it doesn't sit very tight, but it fits nonetheless, and it's got pretty good slouch here, pretty good slouch action. So that is really nice hat. And I mean, the way she's used these Grello shades, I mean, it's just on point. And I look forward to wearing this along with my Threitmuir sweater and that yellow shawl I started designing eons ago. They're gonna go together so well. Hat hair. And the leaf blowers are back. I've filed a complaint now to the Tower Hamlets home because of these leaf blower guys. They've started using them in the rain. In the rain. You're not gonna blow leaves in the rain, you're just gonna be bothering me. Anyway, I did this hat, I mentioned in the main episode. Really quite like that as well. This is a bracket hat. Can definitely recommend if you want to cable some. Just saying. Should have fixed the pom-pom. It's alright. It's like a bit... should just be placed a bit more firmly. Anyway, I've had a lot of good hat experiences lately. I really want to get on some woolly worm-hatted hats because they're so different from any other hat. I definitely want to get my mitts on the new Kate Davies Hyde book. I have pre-ordered it, so it's going to come when it comes. And it's just hats, just colourwork hats or other interesting use of colours in hats. And I mean, I love every Kate Davies publication under the sun, but that one in particular, I am just going to be enjoying so much. So yeah, that is some hat recommendations from me. Have you ever forgotten how to say something in Norwegian? Every time. I can't really speak Norwegian anymore. Like most of the time my sister and my mum don't understand what I say and they get angry at me for mumbling, and I'm like, I just don't use this language much anymore. I mean, I'm never really that good at speaking clearly or coherently anyway, but it doesn't help if you don't use the language much. And it happens a lot that I'm just like, that word, you know, in English it's, and then Norwegians have to help me come up with that word, even though I know, I just don't use Norwegian a lot. Though I will say the past 2 years I've used Norwegian in London more than I did my first, how many years I lived here? 5 years. The first 5 years I lived there, I didn't use Norwegian much. It could be months between. Whereas now I've got at least 2 to 4 Norwegian friends living in London. So that is something I use a lot more now than before. That's not what you asked though, but yeah, it happens a lot that words just escape me in Norwegian and I know them in English. More so than the other way around. And also, what language do you dream in? I don't dream in language. Is that something people do? Do people usually dream in language? I don't. My dreams are somewhere between visual and conceptual. It's like I don't hear or read anything. I just know and I see. You know? Like things happen, people interact, but I don't think the knowledge that is kind of observed is necessarily verbal. I just know, because I mean it's all happening in my brain. It's not like anything needs to be communicated across from one part of the brain to the other. Like I know what happens in my dream because it's happening in my head. I don't know. It just, I don't think there's any language in my dreams, no. Ooh, it's a dilemma. If you had to choose one platform, YouTube, Instagram or Ravelry. I mean, I know that YouTube and Instagram is kind of where I get my following, you know. It started on YouTube, it's definitely more on Instagram now. But I love Ravelry, you guys. I really could not let go of Ravelry. I mean, consider that it's more than just my platform. It is also, I mean, it is where I sell my patterns. But aside from that, it's where I find patterns. It's where I categorize, guys. Is that a word for that? Cataloging. It's where I put my projects, my everything I knit, my history, my queue, I just could not do without Ravelry. I would ditch Instagram and YouTube in a minute if I could just do Ravelry. So yeah, sorry those of you following me everywhere but Ravelry. That's it may not be the most popular choice. I just, yeah, it's just where I do all the knitting stuff, and the knitting stuff totally is like weirdly paramount. And I could just like, you know, bully Ravelry into like having a video platform and a photo sharing stream. That'd be fine. I'd totally do Ravelry. And I had to change my second battery because I am talking a lot today. So, more questions. Only knit mittens or sweater the rest of your life. This may come as a big shocker, so like hold on to your needles, but I choose sweaters. Yeah. Thing is, as much as I love making mittens and it gives me so much joy, instant gratification, I can play with colors and motifs, and it's kind of, you know, my livelihood, I do wear sweaters a whole lot more, and I don't think that should come as a great surprise. So I mean, yeah, sweaters. And I guess if I did, I'd probably just design more sweaters, which I should be doing anyway, quite frankly. It's my favorite yarn and color. Ooh, color shouldn't be that hard to guess. It is this, actually, this color right here. Like, this is the burgundy of the burgundy. I call everything burgundy, I know. This, I feel like, is the definition. Like, it's not so red brown that it's maroon, it's not so purple that it's more of a plum. It's just burgundy, you know. It's just that sweet spot between the red, the brown, the blue, the pink. They're just warm but cool, and yeah, and it's just, it works with my complexion, and I love it. I think it's pretty, and it's very trendy this year. I thought it was like trendy 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then I thought I'd be unfashionable now that I'm been like on the burgundy binge now. But no, it's everywhere in the shops now, like all the burgundies and the mustard yellows. So yes, burgundy. As for yarns, I don't think anyone should be surprised to hear that that would be, say, this yarn. Oh, there's another one of my favorite color. This is basically the same color. It's pretty much the same. I love this color. This I have hoarded. I think I have close to 20 of these balls now, because it's from PT2 that was discontinued, because it's so similar to Phenol that they just rebaptized Phenol into Phenol PT2. And so yeah, it is that yarn, Phenol, PT2, what have you. Definitely. It's also Usk, so that's this yarn. Usk, Phenol, those are all big favorites. I also love Vilja. I don't have that here right now, but it's what I knitted my Skumring / Nightfall cardigan out of. That is absolutely lovely and so soft. I also love Spindrift and 2-ply jumper weight from Shetland. I really also love Lamb's Wool from Roma, so that's like the finer version of this. And Holst Super Soft. It's very light. It is, if not equal in softness to this, a bit softer, I would argue, depending on the dye, because always the grey and the lighter ones are usually softer. It's really, really, really light. You can almost knit it to the same gauge as this, yet it will weigh half of it, and that really increases the probability that I'm actually going to wear it and bring it around with me. Because a big colorwork cardigan or a sweater is great, but am I gonna like be able to fit it in my bag? Probably not. So I really like Holst, both for their affordability and for making garments that are just light as a feather. Favorite yarn shop in London? Ooh, well, this is gonna sound like a bit of a broken record if you heard me say this before, but my favorites are Wild and Wool in Lower Clapton, not too far away from Knit with Attitude in Stoke Newington, also not too far away from Loop in Angel. You can totally do a little walk between them. Also Tribe, that just opened up far away in Richmond, is amazing. I really also like Nest up in Crouch End, and I like Fabrication, that's closer to here, in like Broadway Market. They're quite nice, but I don't actually buy yarn there, I just like the shop. And I really want to check out Sharp Works down in Brixton. I've never been there, but definitely my top 3 now for that Tribe has opened is Wild and Woolly, Knit with Attitude, and Loop. The Village Haberdashery is also brilliant, I forgot those. And then there's the Handweaver Studio, which is just good for like coned yarns. So yeah, that's some yarn shops in London for you. What are your ultimate goals as a designer? Ooh. I don't know. I know people say they want to write a book, and I do, but that's more of the symbolism of it rather than the act of doing it. And the income. I don't think it's necessarily the biggest way to pay the bills. It's just a very nice thing to do, to just have that as a thing that acknowledges your accomplishments as a designer, because not everyone can get a book deal. And I mean, you could self-publish, but it really is quite a testament to how far you've come, and I would like to do a book for that reason. And it's nice, physical items are nice, and you know, all my patterns are so digital now. I that would add another dimension to it that I would really like. But yeah, ultimate goals is such a big question. I mean, I haven't actually talked so much about the actual designs. I guess that's part of the question. What I would make. I wish I was able to make just about anything. I feel like I'm still a bit restricted in the things that I'm able to make and confident to make. And I do kind of believe that I shouldn't make something I'm not already good at, which is sort of true and also a little bit limiting, because it means that unless I do make it, I'm not going to be good at it. So I need to not hold myself back so much either. I definitely wish I could do more things, more variety of things, that I was confident in designing other things than the kind of things that I do, just to branch out. And yeah, that would be my ultimate goal, I think, to just like be able to design anything. I'm gonna go with that. So I'm curious about your perspective on how knitting can help promote mental health. It's hard to say because I do not knit, and I think if I didn't knit, I wouldn't have very good mental health. Now, it's not to say that my mental health is already brilliant. I've had a lot of setbacks the past year or two, but 3, depending when you start counting. Maybe it's just never been grand. But imagine if I had that and not knitting. I'd be going mad. Like, I just not... Where do you channel the anxiety if you don't, you know? Like, I'm being a bit silly now, but honestly, if you struggle with anxiety, and that's just like one part of mental health, right? But it's a very common one, and it's a common symptom for a lot of things. Anxiety is about having a surplus of energy that isn't really targeted in a very positive way. It's usually going to what you fear, what you're nervous about, what it just makes your body go into that state of something bad is happening, and I'm not going too into detail because I reckon it can be hard for some, but that's kind of what anxiety does. It's just putting energy into the wrong places, and I think knitting can help people channel energy in. And I'm not talking like energy like wishy-washy woo. I'm just saying that when you have that restlessness, that too much in you, you can channel that into knitting and calm down and feel like you are being productive, that you are making stuff, that you are creative, productive person, that you are effectively in a way channeling your fidgeting. Some people call it stimming, depending on what you're diagnosed with, which is odd, or whether you're diagnosed. You're really just occupying your hands in a rhythmic motion. It is similar to people who are rocking when they're like mentally ill, you know? You're doing something that is soothing. Like, some people like go this, some people tap their feet. Like, there's a lot of nervous behavior people do with their bodies that when we look at it from outsiders, we're often not very understanding, and we think people are weird. It's really adaptive behavior, and knitting I consider part of that, to just like do stuff with your hands. And like, it kind of, I mean, apart from knitting not being entirely normal, it looks normal, like it's explainable behavior, and it's soothing. You are introducing that rhythmic bodily behavior. I think that's brilliant for mental health. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So there's a lot of things about the mental health role in knitting that we only understand so much about. You know, there's been books about how it's good for stroke patients because it connects the hemispheres if that's been damaged. Like, it's a two-handed motion. I think actually the throwing method is even better there, because you are crossing the two visual sides as well. So there's a lot about that. There are, yeah, it's good literature on it. And just like from personal experience as well, like I don't know what the percentage is exactly, but amongst all the knitters I know, mental health issues is not rare. I don't think that means that knitting is what's causing it. I don't think any of us think that. I think it is something that people who struggle with their mental health are attracted to because of how it feels better and how it helps us. And that is fantastic. So I could devote a whole episode to this. I should like open a separate channel for this. I'm gonna move on. How can I improve my gauge for colorwork knitting and is continental better? I can't really comment on whether continental is better because that's all I do. People who throw or do continental throwing combination and other things may say that theirs is better. I really would have needed to try them all to know, so I'm not going to answer that part of the question. But I will comment on a colorwork gauge. If what you mean by that is that you get a different gauge with colorwork than stockinette, that is, you know, if you put a ruler down on your knitting and you measure the size of your stitching, that's what you do, right? When you measure how many stitches that fit within 1 inch or 4 inches, you are measuring the size of your stitches. The width in this case, row gauge is measuring the height, but stitch gauge is measuring the width of the stitches. Usually affected by needle size, usually affected by yarn, but it can be different for colorwork. Sometimes we just tension differently with colorwork, and that means the gauge changes. For most people that means you get more stitches to the inch, that is, it's tighter, but for some it's actually looser, so they get fewer stitches to the inch, but that's kind of a minority. I'm mainly going to focus on the majority issue, but for the minority you just swap around my recommendations. In those cases you could just go up the next needle size. For me it's the next needle size, for other people it might be several. If it's several, I would maybe look into see if you have other issues with your knitting. It could be a float issue. But for me, having sorted out my floats, I know my issue is just that I knit tighter with colorwork. I do hold the strands a little bit differently. I usually hold my one strand across here, but when I knit colorwork, they're across here. So this one here is differently tensioned. And I think that affects them both actually, and it gives me a different gauge. It becomes tighter if that's at all possible. Apparently it is, and it's quite tight already. So I just need to go up to the next needle size. If I'm knitting on 3mm, the next needle size is 3.25. If I'm knitting on a 4mm, the next needle size is 4.5. If I'm knitting on a 7mm, the next size is probably 8. So that's kind of how I operate there. But it might be different for you. You may need to go down because you need laser for colorwork. That you need to find that out. You do that by measuring gauge. But the other thing you want to make sure that you're not doing, because knitting looser is not going to help you there. I say knitting looser by means of needle size. Do not ever try to knit looser just by loosening it up. You want to knit to the tension that is you, to knit evenly, and it's just not a good idea to just try to affect your tension. As long as there are needle sizes available in the world, do not just try to change your tension. But you may find that the whole needle size changing thing is not actually helping, because what is the most common issue, it might be equal to the needle size thing, but most commonly is that people are scared of floats, and I don't understand why. When I started colorwork, I was just like, well, it's just like knitting with 2 yarns, and the ones that you don't do in one, you do in the other. Like, I didn't think about the floats, they were just there. And yeah, I had issues first with the floats being too tight. I thought I had to fix that by knitting looser. I thought I had to fix it, like, you know, just like loosening up my hand, and it just looked weird and not nice. So what I did in the end, I checked out how I could loosen up my floats. I usually didn't have this issue if I was knitting big circumference things, but if I was knitting on a smaller circumference, it was clearly bunching up. And so there's a lot of things that I do to remedy that. Every time I knitted a handful of stitches, 5 to 10, maybe more, I will just stretch them out on my left hand needle. I will stretch them out. If they spread apart well enough, then that means the floats are long enough. If they can't really spread across the way you would be able to with stockinette, your floats are too tight. You know, it needs to be able to spread out the way just stockinette would on that left hand needle. If your float length doesn't allow you to do that, think back undo it again with longer floats. Do not be scared of longer floats. Do not get so hung up on catching the floats even. Long floats aren't going to come to bite you. People are so nervous about, oh, did the floats catch with your fingers when you put in your mittens, when you put in your socks? No! It's not like I put my mittens with my hands like this. I put them on with my hands like this. They go in this way. Sometimes I actually even kind of poke my hand into the end of the mitten first, and it's sort of, I roll it down. I would do that even if it didn't have floats. It's just kind of how I put on mittens. I'm hungry. Can you hear that? So I would just try to not worry about floats, but just consider that they need to be long enough. People tend to do the other way around, where they worry that they are too long and that they're going to get in the way, that they need to be caught, blah blah blah. No, that should not be your priority. Your priority should be that they should be long enough, not hanging, you know, but long enough to get that flexibility when you stretch on your left hand needle. I've got other advice for like magic loop and things like that, where you could like shift around the start of your round, things like that, but I think I'm going to leave it at that and get to other questions. Okay, I think I actually decided to wrap things up now. I've got the postman coming any minute with my yarn order. I am very excited. It's getting darker and I'm starving. So this has been lovely. I love making bonus content when it's been a long time since I have been able to sit down and record. So the question is now if I'm going to have time to sit down and edit, but that's another issue. When you see this, it will be done and edited. There's nothing you have to worry about. So thank you all so much for watching. I will hopefully be back shortly, and I will try to also record from Norway. But until then, we are going to have Vlogmas. I'm going to make it a bit of a low-key, low-effort Vlogmas, but it's going to be Vlogmas nonetheless. So it's just kind of follow my day, get into the Christmas spirit, that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you for watching. Catch you later. Bye.